What would you do if you looked in the mirror one day and saw your reflection blink when you hadn't? What if it smiled while you frowned, or moved its hand while yours remained still? For most of us, this would be nothing more than a fleeting trick of the mind, perhaps the result of fatigue or stress. But for Eleanor Blackwood, a 34-year-old librarian from Salem, Massachusetts, this became a reality that would consume her life and ultimately lead to one of the most disturbing cases of apparent psychological deterioration ever documented. The year was 1997, and Eleanor lived alone in a Victorian house she had inherited from her grandmother. Neighbors described her as quiet but pleasant, someone who kept to herself but was always polite when encountered. She had worked at the Salem Public Library for over a decade, known for her meticulous attention to detail and her vast knowledge of local history. Nothing about Eleanor suggested she was anything other than an ordinary woman living an ordinary life. That is, until the mirrors began to change everything. It started, according to Eleanor's own journal entries found after the incident, on a Tuesday morning in late October. She was brushing her teeth before work when she noticed something peculiar. Her reflection seemed to lag behind her movements by just a fraction of a second. At first, she dismissed it as sleepiness, but as the days passed, the delay became more pronounced. By the end of the week, Eleanor was convinced that her reflection was moving independently. The journal entries from this period reveal a woman struggling to understand what she was experiencing. Quote, "I know how this sounds, even to myself, as I write it, but I swear on my grandmother's grave that my reflection moved its mouth when I wasn't speaking. It was subtle, just a slight parting of the lips, but I saw it. I watched for 20 minutes, standing perfectly still, and she did it again." Unquote. Eleanor began timing her reflection's movements, documenting every instance of what she perceived as independent action. Her handwriting, normally neat and precise, became increasingly erratic as the days passed. She wrote of her reflection, tilting its head at different angles, of eyes that seemed to focus on things outside the mirror's view, and, most disturbing of all, of expressions that didn't match her own emotional state. By November, Eleanor had covered the bathroom mirror with a bedsheet. She told her co-workers that it had cracked, and she was waiting for a replacement. But the journal tells a different story. "I can't look at her anymore. She's getting bolder. Yesterday, while I was crying about Mother's anniversary, she was smiling. Not just a small smile, but a wide, knowing grin that made my blood run cold. It's as if she finds my pain amusing, as if she's studying me." The situation escalated when Eleanor began to believe her reflection was learning from her. She wrote extensively about how the figure in the mirror seemed to be taking notes of her daily routines, her habits, her fears. Quote, "She watches me eat, and I swear she's memorizing every bite. When I brush my hair, she doesn't just mirror the motion anymore. She anticipates it. Her hand moves to the same spot on her head before mine does. She's learning to be me." Unquote. Eleanor's behavior at work became increasingly erratic. Colleagues noticed she avoided the staff restroom, choosing instead to use the public facilities on the other side of the building. She removed the small mirror from her desk and requested that her lunch meetings be held in the conference room, without the large reflective window. When questioned about these changes, Eleanor would become visibly agitated and deflect with excuses about lighting or acoustics. The real turning point came in December when Eleanor discovered that covering the mirrors wasn't enough. According to her journal, the reflection had found other ways to observe her. Quote, "She's not just in mirrors anymore. I saw her in the window of the refrigerator, distorted but unmistakably watching. Then in the black screen of the television, in the surface of my coffee, in any reflective surface she can find. She's hunting for ways to see me, to study me. God help me. I think she's getting ready for something." Unquote. Eleanor began a systematic campaign to eliminate every reflective surface in her home. She painted over the bathroom mirror with black paint. She replaced her television with a radio. She covered her windows with thick curtains and removed all the picture frames with glass. Neighbors later reported seeing her in her backyard at odd hours, smashing dishes and anything else that might cast a reflection. But perhaps the most chilling entries in Eleanor's journal describe what she believed was her reflections' growing independence. Quote, "I woke up at 3 a.m. last night and went to get water. As I passed the hallway, I saw light coming from under the bathroom door. But I had painted over that mirror weeks ago. I stood there for 10 minutes, too afraid to open the door. The light was moving, flickering like a candle, but I don't own any candles. When I finally gathered the courage to look, the room was dark and cold. But the paint on the mirror was disturbed, scratched, as if someone had been trying to claw through it from the other side." Unquote. Eleanor's final entries describe a complete breakdown of the barrier between her world and what she believed was the mirror world. She wrote of hearing footsteps in her house when she was certain she was alone, of finding her belongings moved or rearranged in ways that suggested someone else was living in her space. Most disturbing of all, she began to question whether she was still herself. Quote, "I caught a glimpse of myself in a store window today, and for just a moment, I didn't recognize the person looking back. The expression was wrong, too knowing, too satisfied. What if she's not just learning to be me? What if she's already succeeded? What if I'm the one trapped in the mirror now, writing these words while she lives my life?" Unquote. The final entry, in Eleanor's journal, dated January 15, 1998, consists of a single line repeated 47 times. "She's wearing my face better than I am." Eleanor Blackwood was found 3 days later by a co-worker who had come to check on her after she failed to show up for work. The police report describes a scene that defies easy explanation. Eleanor was discovered in her bathroom, sitting on the floor facing the painted-over mirror. She had used her fingernails to scratch away most of the black paint, revealing the mirror underneath. Her fingertips were bloody, and there were scratch marks. Not just on the mirror's surface, but somehow on the back of the glass as well. As if someone had been clawing at it from inside. Eleanor was catatonic when found, unresponsive to questions or stimuli. She was taken to Salem Hospital, where she remained in a dissociative state for several weeks. When she finally began to speak again, her words only deepened the mystery. She insisted that she was not Eleanor Blackwood, but rather Eleanor's reflection, and that the real Eleanor was trapped somewhere she couldn't reach her. Dr. Sarah Chen, the psychiatrist who treated Eleanor, later wrote in her case notes, "The patient demonstrates a complete dissociation from her previous identity." She refers to Eleanor Blackwood in the third person and shows genuine distress when addressed by that name. Most unusually, she seems to have no memory of events that occurred outside of what she calls mirror time. She can describe in vivid detail things that happened in front of mirrors, but has no recollection of activities that took place in rooms. Without reflective surfaces, Eleanor spent 2 years in psychiatric care before being released to a halfway house. She never returned to work at the library, and neighbors reported that she moved away from Salem shortly after her release. But the story doesn't end there. The house Eleanor had lived in was sold to a young couple 6 months after her hospitalization. They lasted exactly 3 weeks. The new owners, David and Maria Santos, called the police on their 21st day in the house. They reported that someone was living in their walls, moving their belongings, and watching them sleep. When officers arrived, they found the couple barricaded in their bedroom, having covered every mirror and reflective surface in the house with black cloth. The couple moved out that same day, forfeiting their deposit and refusing to explain their experience to the real estate agent. The house has remained empty since then. Local teenagers claim it's haunted, but their stories focus not on typical ghostly phenomena like cold spots or strange sounds. Instead, they speak of reflections that don't match reality, of mirrors that show rooms different from the ones you're standing in, and most disturbing of all, of seeing Eleanor Blackwood's face looking back at them from every reflective surface, wearing an expression of desperate pleading, as if she's still trying to communicate something vital. From wherever she's trapped, Dr. Chen continued to study Eleanor's case long after her patient's release. In her published paper on mirror-based delusions, she wrote, "What makes this case unique is not just the patient's unwavering belief in her altered identity, but the physical evidence that supports some aspects of her claims. The scratches on both sides of the mirror, the documented instances of objects being moved when the patient was under observation. And most puzzling of all, the fact that photographs of the patient taken after her breakdown show subtle but consistent differences. From her pre-incident appearance, it's as if she truly had become someone else. The scientific community largely dismissed Dr. Chun's observations as confirmation bias or measurement error. But she wasn't the only professional troubled by the case. Officer Martinez, who responded to the initial call about Eleanor, later requested a transfer to a different district. In his unofficial report, he wrote, "I've seen a lot of strange things in 20 years of police work, but nothing that made me question reality itself. That house, that woman, the whole situation felt wrong in a way I can't explain. I stopped looking in mirrors for months after visiting that place. And sometimes, late at night, I still wonder if the person looking back at me is really me." The Eleanor Blackwood case remains one of the most documented yet unexplained incidents of its kind. Skeptics point to her family history of mental illness, her social isolation, and the stress of living alone in an old house as contributing factors to a complete psychological break. They explain the physical evidence as coincidence, misperception, or even deliberate staging by a woman whose grip on reality had already slipped. But believers in the supernatural see something far more sinister. They point to the consistency of Eleanor's account, the physical evidence that contradicts conventional explanations, and most compellingly, the fact that others who entered her house experienced similar phenomena. They suggest that Eleanor stumbled upon something that exists in the spaces between our world and its reflection. Something that hungers for the life it can only observe, but never truly possess. Whatever the truth may be, the Eleanor Blackwood case serves as a chilling reminder of how thin the line can be between perception and reality, between the self we know and the selves we might become. It forces us to confront an uncomfortable question. When you look in the mirror, how can you be certain that the person looking back is really you? The house on Maple Street in Salem still stands empty. Its windows boarded up, and its mirrors covered with black paint that someone renews every few months, though no one knows who. Local children dare each other to peek through the gaps in the boards. But those brave enough to try report seeing the same thing. Rooms filled with mirrors reflecting nothing at all. And in the center of it all, a woman who looks like Eleanor Blackwood, sitting on the floor and writing frantically in a journal that never seems to run out of pages. Perhaps she's still trying to tell us something. Perhaps she's still trying to warn us that the face in the mirror might not always be our own. Or perhaps, most terrifying of all, she's succeeded in her final goal, and somewhere in Salem, a woman who used to be a reflection is living Eleanor Blackwood's life better than Eleanor ever could, while the real Eleanor remains trapped in a world of glass and silver, desperately trying to claw her way back to a reality that may no longer recognize her as its own. The next time you look in a mirror, pay attention. Does your reflection move exactly when you do? Does it wear the same expression? Does it look away when you're not watching? Because if Eleanor Blackwood's story teaches us anything, it's that the person in the mirror might be far more interested in your life than you realize. And once they learn enough, they might decide that your life would be better lived by them. Remember, reflections are supposed to be echoes of ourselves, nothing more than light bouncing off a surface. But echoes, as Eleanor discovered, sometimes develop voices of their own. And once they start speaking, they might never stop trying to take your place in the world beyond the glass.